What's the biggest myth about buying an established business and then
Mhm.
going through the SBA?
Mhm. There's a couple of myths out there. Um, Many people, maybe that are working for corporate America, think if they are going to be a business owner, they have to start one up. And that's not true anymore because these baby boomers, we're all living longer. This is the greatest wealth transfer ever in our world, in our country, because baby boomers are living longer. So what we're experiencing right now, you don't have to start up a business, you can acquire one. So 11,000 baby boomers are retiring per day. And
That's
out
a
of
lot.
that is a lot. And
That
this
is a lot.
it's crazy. And this trend is going to continue for the next 5 years. We call it the silver tsunami.
Well, welcome back to the Professional Rule Breaker Show. I am your host, Kathy Walterhouse, and I am so glad that you are here because what we do every single day in our podcast is we want to make a big impact for you so that you can grow your income. So today, I want to start out with a couple questions. First off, have you ever thought about buying an established money making small business? And if you have, are you confused about how to go through the Small Business Administration for funding? Well, I have to tell you, you are in luck today because my next guest is a trailblazer in securing SBA backed loans for individuals to transition into owning and operating prosperous small businesses. She loves to ensure that everyone has an equal shot at owning a business and has enabled over 100 dreams to secure funding that's SBA backed funding for business acquisitions. So, my guest today is Deb Curtis. So, welcome.
Oh, thank you, Kathy. You have such a lovely voice. I could listen to that opening over and over again. I love it.
Oh, thank you. It's so funny because not to digress, I get that comment. People say, "Oh, I just listen to sometimes just to hear your voice." And I was like, "Well, thank you for the compliment." But let's talk about you instead of me.
Mhm.
So, you've had this journey. You were in the corporate world and you've had some things happen in your life. So, how do you go from that point to where you are now? Because it's really kind of unique to find people that can help with the whole SBA loans and understanding the SBA.
Mhm. That is so true. It's so complicated, and I wish it wasn't.
Right? It really
I
shouldn't
know.
be.
But perhaps this message would resonate with you and your listeners. Um, I think the government just can be complicated, right? So the SBA is a government backed loan to support the retention and growth of small businesses. And why it's complicated is because the SBA doesn't actually give the money, the banks give the money. And banking, everyone has, every bank, the big banks, the community banks, the small banks, the credit unions, there's even non-banks out there that will do business lending, and they have what is called a preferred license to do so with the SBA. They all have, Kathy, their own credit policies regarding whatever the small business loan request is. There are many, but my focus is just on acquiring established businesses. But that is where it's complicated, Kathy, and it shouldn't be. So, what I have learned along my journey of, let's see, 30 years in corporate America, the last 20 were in small business banking and lending. And a good portion of the last 15 years was as an SBA lender. If I would have known what I know today on how to navigate the waters of trying to acquire these established businesses, I might not be having this conversation today because I may have a
Oh,
portfolio of a couple of small businesses that were um, active and went through all the startup stages, owned by baby boomers, and they trained up their employees to operate the business successfully so the baby boomer can start to enjoy semi-retirement, grandchildren, all of that good stuff. And now they're looking for Gen Xers, millennials, the younger generations to take over these businesses. If I would have known this 5, 10, 15 years ago, I would have a small little portfolio of absentee owned small businesses, and I might be retired and probably traveling, maybe with my grandchildren. So I'm going to
I would say
pause.
2020 is hindsight, you know? So yeah.
Yeah. I'm here now to teach that, and I'll pause to see if you have another question before we move on.
Well, I'm glad that you're here to teach that because I think a lot of people don't understand the process. They don't understand what's available.
Yeah.
But I have to start off. So, like, what's the biggest myth about buying an established business and then
Mhm.
going through the SBA?
Mhm. There's a couple of myths out there. Many people, maybe that are working for corporate America, think if they are going to be a business owner, they have to start one up. And that's
Mhm.
not true anymore because these baby boomers, we're all living longer. This is the greatest wealth transfer ever in our world, in our country, because baby boomers are living longer. So, what we're experiencing right now, you don't have to start up a business, you can acquire one. So, 11,000 baby boomers are retiring per day. And
That's a
out of that,
lot.
that is a lot. And
That
this,
is a lot.
it's crazy. And this trend is going to continue for the next 5 years. We call it the silver tsunami because the baby boomers have gray hair. We get to color it, some of us ladies. I'm not a baby boomer, I'm a Gen Xer and I have gray hair. So, um, but yeah, that's a myth. You think you have to start up a business. Here's the second myth. If you acquire a business, people think of it's like purchase financing your first home, which is true. It's very similar. But the difference is, and this is where confusion lies, people think, well, if I'm going to purchase finance a business and the bank is going to do financing, they're looking at their own income right here, right now in their
Mhm.
household. I work full time at corporate, or maybe I currently own a side hustle, small business. My husband, he's still working. How in the world could we afford to pay to buy a business when we have a mortgage payment, we have a car payment, we have college education that we're still paying with a 17-year-old getting ready to move on to school? How do we pay for that if we're going to purchase finance a business? The myth is the businesses you acquire, they're already proven successful with what is called net cash flow, profitability. And the bank underwriters approve the loan for you to buy these established profitable businesses based on the most recent 3 years IRS filed tax returns. That is the income that pays for your loan project. In addition, the current baby boomer owner, Kathy, is owning a salary. He's pulling a salary from the business to live. Well, that salary will be transferred to you, the new owner transitioning in. So you'll earn a salary day one, which you don't do when you start up a business, and you'll have sufficient income based on the historical tax returns to pay for that loan project. If you transition in, and I always say, if it's not broke, don't try to fix it.
Right. Why fix it? So
Yeah.
it sounds like it's almost a bit of a mindset switch. And I
Hmm.
think it almost comes from, like, for example, when you buy a house, you have to have 20% down. And so they're probably thinking the same exact thing, correct? So when I buy this business, I'm going to, let's say the business is $500,000. I'm just using that as an
Yeah.
easy number.
Hmm.
Oh, I'm going to have to come up with $100,000
Hmm.
rather than looking at the cash flow and everything that's coming in through the current business. So it is a bit of a mindset switch.
Hmm.
So it's how do you even find these businesses then, these profitable businesses? Because I think that's another area where I think people might have a challenge.
Yeah, you're right. And maybe your listeners would understand this quote and you would as well. We hear a lot that there are business brokers working out there that list small businesses for sale. And for my entire career, the statistic is if it's on the market, the small business listing, 80% of the ones on the market cannot get the bank financing because those tax returns don't prove enough income based on what the seller wants to earn. And I'll tell you why. We have a baby boomer business owner, and I think of my dad. You know, he's passed now, but he always wanted to find a shortcut to not pay the IRS any taxes.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Okay. Now
So
I
they
understand where you're going.
Yeah, they took shortcuts, and here's the deal. I mean, the system allows it and we hear about it, but the baby boomers, Gen Xers, millennials going forward, what you need to understand, if you take a shortcut now on your small business and don't report profitability to the IRS, which means you need to pay taxes like all of us corporate employees
Right.
have to pay,
Right.
you can't expect to sell your business and earn a wonderful sale price if you never reported profits. The IRS is the government and the SBA is the government. They're not going to allow you to have it on both ends in a great fashion. It's going to bite you in the butt eventually.
Oh, for sure it will. So
Yeah.
if there's 80% that don't qualify, how do you find the 20%?
So the 20% are out there. It's a lot of hunting and finding, and I suggest to your listeners, if you Google how to buy a small business, it tells you to start with a business broker. We must remember Google is not always accurate. And what I mean by that is a lot of the big brokerage firms will pay for SEO to bring up their rankings on Google, and they want to capture the business buyer and control the process. Similar to purchase financing a home, you as a small business buyer need to work with a small business lending specialist like myself or a direct lender to find out what do you qualify for. You mentioned 500,000 earlier, Kathy. Well,
Right.
these businesses sell for 500,000 up to 5 million. And like buying a home, you will need to have a down payment. And the minimum down payment is 10% with the SBA backing. And that can be split between the seller and gifted funds. And there's all kinds of ways to chop up that 10% so it's not a huge burden on your personal savings. Um, so did I answer your question? I got a little off track there with
No,
my
it's
Gen
okay.
Xer
It
brain.
was all about finding the 20%. It's almost
Yeah.
like digging for the
Yeah.
gold. How do you get to those 20%? So it sounds like that the business brokers
Hmm.
may or may not have access to those 20% that would
Right on.
actually qualify for an SBA loan. Um,
Right.
so there's the other group
Hmm.
that we need to dig to find those. Do you
Yeah.
recommend people looking at like an area where they have a passion and start searching that way? And then I would have to say is what type of criteria would there be so
Hmm.
that you can get an SBA backed loan?
I love your forward thinking on how to find the business that qualifies. That's the secret sauce. And what it is, networking with your local chamber. Let's
Okay.
say you love HVAC companies, air conditioning. You
Mhm.
live in Atlanta, I live in muggy Wisconsin in the summer months, and we that's an essential need. We have got to have air conditioning. And you can buy, there are many small businesses out there that provide those units and install them and do annual checks on them. You don't have to be the hands on tech that does the work. You could be a woman that has worked the front desk and took care of customer service, and you know how these companies operate, and you just love that process, and you make sure you have the hired techs that are already working at the business. Why not reach out, if that's a passion of yours, to your local companies, your mom and pop businesses? A lot of times, if you reach out to a small business owner, especially if they're a baby boomer, and just ask them, have you ever thought about selling your business? And they're funny, they'll say, well, yeah, for the right price, but build a relationship with them, because they would rather work with you one-on-one privately than work with a business broker who they have to pay 10% to. And then now it's public and on the market, which is a risk where the employees may get spooked if they're hearing that the business is for sale. So,
Right.
um,
Right. It
yeah,
almost sounds like it's a little bit of like almost like basic sales 101.
right
You
on.
start doing the research, you start calling
Yeah,
and just asking the questions.
that's
I think
right.
sometimes in this day and age, and I'd love to get your input, this is a little bit of a side thing, but
Hmm.
a lot of times people are afraid to call and they
Hmm.
just send out a bunch of emails. And I always think the best way to get an answer is human to human.
Hmm.
Pick up the phone or set up an appointment.
Yeah,
Because I think people, if you ask questions, if you're authentic, they'll want to help.
that's right. You're
And
so
even that
spot
example
on.
that you just gave, an HVAC owner, they
Hmm.
may not want to sell, but they might know of something, a similar service or something that would complement them that that might also be available for
That's
sale.
right. Yeah. And if you're a loyal customer to these businesses, there's a reason why you're a loyal customer, because you like the business.
That's
So
right.
think about that. The ones you're visiting all the time, um, you know, those are the ones where the owner already knows you, and they're adult children today. Statistic wise, they don't want to take over the business. I think they watched mom and dad go through those startup years of grueling hours and working nonstop, and they just don't want to enter that. But they're not thinking that it is pretty much what we call absentee owned or semi absentee owned, where the baby boomer owner trained up his employees, and they own or operate without him there. They're doing the job and it's profitable. Yeah, so think of those businesses that you visit every day. Or there are some platforms out there where you can query up certain industries and obtain the owner's name and email and number. But it goes back to what you said, Kathy, that human to human connection. Emails just don't do it.
Right. I mean, I think people get so many emails.
Oh Lord,
I
yeah,
mean, I don't even like to look at email. There's some emails, addresses that I have, I don't even look at anymore.
I know.
So I think the human touch
Hmm.
is really important. So let's say you have found the business, or so you think. You have found the business, and you're going to have to get some financing.
Hmm.
Tell me about the SBA. Tell me how the SBA can help the small business owner.
Right. And this goes back to what you mentioned earlier, the myths. There are myths out there. And a lot of individuals out there think that SBA loans, you must have collateral to obtain these loans. And that is not true. What you must have when you apply, whether you are the small business owner or you're acquiring one, that business must have that proven cash flow. That is how the SBA will guarantee the bank's loans, because they provide the money to the business owners or the business buyers. So the myth that everyone needs to take away from here, and the benefit of the SBA, is they guarantee these business acquisition loans that are what we call uncollateralized. There is a lot of intangible assets with small businesses that are selling today. And what I mean by that is the name of the company. It might be that HVAC company that we were talking about in your town. Everyone just loves the company because they give great service. There's value in that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
The employees are a value. They've been working for the company for 5, 10, 20 years. They love the business. They love the operations. There are key employees that the owner trained up, like we talked about earlier, that are just running the show. All of that is what we call intangible value, intangible assets, or banks will call it blue sky, meaning there's no hard collateral.
Right.
So,
but both you and I know how important that is.
Yes. It's very important. You don't have to do the startup stages. It's all of that intangible value is there. But the banks, in order for them to give you, the buyer, the money, they're a little bit scared because there's no collateral. That's because you're financing intangible values. So the SBA says, okay, banks, if you help us retain and grow small businesses through business acquisition financing, we'll guarantee that unsecured loan for the business buyer to buy the business up to 75% if that loan should go into default because the business failed. And that is where the banks, Kathy, are comfortable to do these transactions.
Right, because it lowers their risk.
You got it.
By a lot. By a lot. So let's say that you're in the process, and maybe you've even gone through and SBA has approved and backed the loan. What do you see when there's new business owners going into businesses that have been established? What do you see as the biggest mistake?
Yes.
There's probably a lot.
There are. I'm gonna give you two answers. And I coach and mentor individuals that want to go down this road of what to do and what not to do. Number one, and I mentioned earlier, if it's not broken, why fix it? So my point is, in that first year of transition, you don't want to be that business owner that goes in and changes everything. Just, I want to do it my way or the highway. That's going to
just never work, right?
It never does.
First off, you're going to make all your employees, if there are employees, you're going to make them mad.
We all had those supervisors in corporate back in the day.
Yes, we all have.
One of them throughout yes, exactly. So I tell my clients, just transition in with ease. I mean, if there are little minor things you want to tweak, such as a lot of baby boomers don't even have a website for some of these businesses, but they're still profitable. Simple things like that you can put into place. And I coach my clients that. And then the other mistake I see, and I've seen this for years, we will provide, and when I say we, the banks that are financing the sale of this business, the bank will provide, Kathy, what is called additional working capital to pay for the short-term operating expenses.
Okay.
Because when you purchase finance a business and it's you go in, the baby boomer isn't going to leave $500,000 sitting in a bank account for you to pay payroll or to pay the rent and such, right? It's not going to be there.
No.
So the bank will provide working capital to pay for those short-term operating expenses in your business acquisition loan project. And the banks that I work with will also provide a working capital line of credit for the distant payroll needs and short-term operating expenses, where business owners transitioning in make a mistake is spending that money on the wrong stuff that's not for the business.
Uh-oh.
They have all this money and they're like, oh, well, my daughter needs a car, so I'll put, 10 grand toward the down payment. And when all that working capital is maxed out and used up, now how do you do payroll? Things are getting a little bit tight. So I will coach and mentor my clients to make sure they know short-term operating expenses for the business. Stick to that. You have to be very disciplined, and you can hire business advisors to kind of coach you month after month after month, just to keep you, focused. But there you go. Those are probably the two mistakes that I see business owners make. But if
those are huge. I mean, those are things that can really impact the business if you make those mistakes. And I'm glad that there's people like you to help these new business owners out there so that they really, take their business, their new business, and even make it even more successful than what it has been in the past. Because when they do that, they're providing a lot of services to the communities. Yeah. And I saw somewhere that you had written about, and I want you to kind of go into this a little bit, because you said something about the powerhouse is in the communities. So tell me what you mean by that.
Yes, the powerhouse is in the communities, which is the small businesses. I remember being in high school in a small rural town, and I was that gal that signed up for the yearbook committee. I was that young high schooler that was, in sports and plays, and we always had to fundraise. And I would visit the small business owners, and they knew when they saw me walk in, they're like, oh, this girl's going to want money again.
She's going to want something. I know, I've done the same.
Yeah. But they always supported us. And you can't, if we don't keep the retention of small businesses in our communities, our local economies will suffer. They give back to schools, they give back to nonprofits, and they provide employment. And, the big companies need the little companies. It's part of the whole sustaining the whole economic system in America.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I'm a huge lover of small businesses. I grew up with a daddy that would talk to the small business owners. We'd go to the bait shop to go fishing in his boat, and it would take us an hour to get out of the boat, the bait shop, because he'd be chatting about with the business owners where the fish were biting, and 2 dozen worms, and an hour later we're finally on the lake.
Yeah. But that's the good old way of doing business, though, is having that customer interaction.
Yeah.
So I saw something in the news today, and it was Mr. Wonderful from Shark Tank, if you know who I'm talking about.
Sure do.
Kevin O'Leary. And he said that right now there's a crisis in the small businesses in the US because they're having trouble accessing financing. So let's say you have a business that has been successful, but maybe you've had a little bit of a rocky patch for whatever reason. Does the SBA offer anything for not necessarily the transition into buying a business, but your current business that either you want to expand or there's some issues that that's holding you back?
Well, the SBA will offer some stimulus when times are tough. Interesting that you see this on the news, because the banks that did much of the small business lending, they may had been a little more loose on their credit guidelines in 2020 and 2021 when the interest rate environment was much lower.
Right.
And they're starting to feel the pinch, which means some small businesses that were acquired back in 2020 and 2021 and received financing, they were closing their loan with a very low interest rate because prime was, my goodness, 0%
Right.
in 2020.
Good old days.
Yeah. And that was not that long ago. So I'm hoping, similar to when the pandemic was here, the SBA offered PPP to small business owners to help with payroll and the short-term operating expenses. The SBA offered EIDL. Remember the EIDL loans, which was economic development. It was an economic development loan to help support small businesses because we just struggled with the pandemic. But here we are again in another position. Now, time will tell, because I think this news that Kevin O'Leary brought up today, he's smart. We know that. I predict the next 6 months is going to be something to watch when it comes to banks and whether they're going to have some fallouts or merging with one another. What happens, Kathy, when their portfolios start to struggle a bit, their small businesses are starting to struggle? They tighten up their credit policies. We know that. That's what happens. So my suggestion to small businesses out there, because right now the SBA does not have any kind of stimulus to support, especially if you're struggling. Contact your local chambers in the areas where your business operates, or I did this with my son-in-law. He and my daughter own a business up north in rural Wisconsin. And a year ago, they wanted to open up a second location, but they didn't have enough cash and the banks wouldn't approve them. They just wouldn't. And I said, Google up, but trust and verify. Google up small business grants in your state, in your county, in the town where you operate. And you'll see some names pop up and some phone numbers and emails, and just start contacting people to see what kind of grants are available. And sure enough, he found a grant where if he opened up that second location in a downtown rural area, that area wanted to improve the economic return in downtown because it was failing. They would give him the money, which was $75,000 for working capital to open up that second location, fill it up with, the retail products, leasehold improvements to, make the space that they were renting downtown attractive to support their business operations. So here's the beauty. The grant was given to them, $75,000. And if they stay downtown for 3 years and they generate 3 full-time employment positions over the next 3 years, that money's forgiven. And wow. that's not the SBA. That's just your city, your state, your counties.
That's a great idea. Really great idea.
Nose around. My daddy always said to me, you got to nose around and ask questions. And like you said earlier, it's called human to human connection. Talk to people.
Yes.
They'll
Absolutely.
tell you. They'll tell you where to go.
It's just networking. It's getting to know other people and helping those people. Mm-hmm. And then in turn, I always think what goes around comes around. When you're a good steward and you do good things and you help people, things will come around for you. People will remember that. Mm-hmm. So, but that's a fabulous idea about the grants for any type of small businesses. I think that's really fabulous.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this, because I know you're a rule breaker, but what makes you a rule breaker?
I love that.
I love that laugh. As soon as I said it, I knew there was a twinkle in your eye with that, for those of you that are just listening.
I am a rule breaker, but for the right reasons. And my journey in corporate America of 30 years was 20 of it was working in a very male dominated industry, which is SBA lending and business lending and business brokerage. It's all a lot of men. And I'm a rule breaker because it was clear that I was declined promotions back in the 90s because I was a woman and I didn't have a college education. But I proved to them that I could do it. And eventually they promoted me, which paved the way for women in that company, which was a large, well-known company still around today, to promote women. Because they said back then, we don't promote women, because in the 90s, you could get away with that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So this rule breaking is still consistent, and I'm spinning it in a positive manner now that I'm outside of corporate to promote and empower women and our minority population to learn how to purchase finance, establish money-making businesses, and obtain the bank financing backed by the SBA, because our white men who we love, that's my husband, have always been the breadwinner in corporate, and they have done the networking through the decades because they were placed in corporate and climbed the ladder, where many of us women and minorities did not, because we were home taking care of the family, or just for whatever reason, we just didn't get the luck of the ladder. So I'm breaking the rules and saying to all of your listeners, I practice unity and diversity, and I'll help every gender, every color, because we all need to be that way today. Pull out your own ladder. You can stay in corporate if you've got a wonderful corporate job and buy an absentee-owned business and start climbing your own ladder. Or if you want to get out and be a rule breaker because you've been dismissed and overlooked, and you have the fire in the belly and you love people, there you can get out and buy that HVAC company we talked about earlier and have that salary transferred to you day one and just oversee the business. Now, how cool is that? You're learning something today because you're listening. We all need to listen more. And it's okay to break the rules if it's pointing you in the right direction.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I mean, sometimes when people hear the term breaking the rules, it's not doing anything legal.
Yeah.
It is, how can you just push the envelope? What can you do to think outside the box, to do something different or better? I mean, some of the greatest inventors of our time, that's what they've done. And they've come up with services and products that years ago, no one would have imagined that they would exist in today's world. And the same thing's going to happen. You know, generations from now, things are going to be very different because there's those people that are the rule breakers that are coming up with things that is going to serve humanity in a better way.
I like that.
So I could talk to you forever, but I want to ask, where can people find you?
Yes. My website is my first and last name, debcurtis.com. And my favorite social platform of choice is LinkedIn. You'll find me there. Deb Curtis. My colors are red, white, and blue. I love supporting America, small businesses. So thank you for this wonderful opportunity, Kathy.
Oh, it's been my pleasure.
Mm-hmm.
It's definitely been my pleasure to have you, Deb. And for everybody that's out there that's listening or watching, I just want to say, from today on, just think about all the infinite possibilities, because what this lovely lady has brought to us is information about possibly acquiring prosperous businesses. And I think when you think of the infinite possibilities out there, you start looking at things in a different way. And just know that you are special and that you have a gift. So reach for the stars and just go for it, because you can create a ripple effect with everything great that you're doing. Just like she used the example of her, was it your son or your daughter?
Yes.
That now is taking part in bringing back a downtown area. Mm-hmm. That individual is creating a ripple effect. and creating an area for a community. And you can do the very same thing. So I want to thank everyone for joining us here at the Professional Rule Breaker. I will have Deb Curtis's information in the show notes. And if you like what you heard, give us a 5-star review, and don't forget to subscribe, and grab your friend's phone and subscribe for them and tell them that they need to listen as well. So again, thank you everyone, sending you all much love and hoping today is a day filled with impact and income.